0 inches, it's decided, isn't it? While Zhu Tianwo and Su Yuhan were talking, the huge bear in the distance suddenly opened its mouth. Its voice rumbled like thunder. These two little fellows are having a duel here. The rest of you can continue climbing the mountain and not be allowed to stay here. As soon as the giant bear finished speaking, the snow-white tiger-shaped heavenly beast also spoke. Its voice was filled with determination, and the presence spreading out from it was not inferior to that of the giant bear at all. Hearing this, everyone present was slightly stunned. They originally wanted to watch the battle between the two of them. In this way, if they knew who would win and who would lose in the end, wouldn't they only know when they reached the peak? Do you need us to say it a second time? Spiritual light surged in the giant bear's eyes. It looked at Mu Yuyang and then at Zhan Qingyu. It could also tell that these two were the leaders of the two teams. Got it. Mu Yuyang nodded. It was the rule. He did not want to say anything. He was silent for a while and then waved his hand. He turned around and left. Lin Dao also followed without saying anything. Xiao Yan hesitated for a moment. He looked at Zhu Tianwo on the arena and pursed his lips. Suddenly, he said in a clear voice, "Zhu Tianwo, I will wait for you at the top." Xiao Yan smiled gently after he spoke. He quickly left. At this moment, it was futile no matter what he said. In the face of an opponent whose strength was unknown, maintaining the calm in his heart was also an extremely important point. You are long-winded. Zhu Tianwo didn't turn around. His thick skin trembled slightly and he let out a cold laugh. However, the girl in front of him wasn't simple either. At the same time that Mu Yuyang and the rest turned around and left, Zhan Qingyu and the rest of the girls cheered for Su Yuhan. Although they were rather displeased, due to the strength of the giant bear and the tiger-shaped heavenly beast and Zhan Qingyu, the few girls could only leave resentfully. Right, Mu Yuyang, I hope that the next time we meet, it will still be you guys. All of a sudden, Zhan Qingyu turned around and looked at Mu Yuyang with her beautiful eyes. She called out to him and let out a pleasant laugh. I can't ask for more. After all, compared to the Southern Sky and the Star Sky Academy, the Glaze Academy is a soft persimmon. Without waiting for Mu Yuyang to speak, the indignant Wu Shaoqi had already loudly responded. When Zhan Qingyu heard this, her pretty face changed. She pointed at the distant Wu Shaoqi and gritted her teeth, unable to say anything. Qingyu, let's go. When Kiera by the side saw this, she gently pulled Zhan Qingyu's clothes and her voice was so low that it was almost inaudible. I am so angry. Zhan Qingyu angrily turned around. It was not just her. The other two students also had cold expressions on their faces. This Yunluo Academy was really too arrogant. Zhu Tianwo, give that girl a good beating. Just as she was about to lift her leg and leave, Wu Shaoqi, who was already far away, once again shouted loudly. When it reached Zhan Qingyu and the others' ears, it immediately caused their beautiful eyes to shoot out flames. Yuhan, you have to beat that brat until he looks for his teeth all over the ground. Even though Chen Lu and Yuan Zian were holding her as she left, Zhan Qingyu was still like a shrew that was throwing a tantrum as she cried out loudly. She no longer had the previously calm and collected demeanor. Annoying woman, the huge bear gritted its teeth and shook its huge head while being carsick. The tiger-shaped heavenly beast by the side also nodded in agreement when it heard this. When it thought of the tigress at home, its huge body trembled. Turning their gazes to the arena, Zhu Tianwo and Su Yuhan both had calm expressions and were completely unaffected by Wu Shaoqi and Zhan Qingyu. Let's begin. The huge bear lazily laid on the huge rock, waved its furry paws, and said in a deep voice. Boom! The instant his voice fell, Zhu Tianwo and Su Yuhan rushed over explosively at the same time. They instantly started fighting. How's Zhu Tianwo's strength? After leaving the location of the arena far away, the few of them stopped in their tracks. Mu Yuyang hurriedly looked at Xiao Yan. He was the one who returned to the academy on the last day and did not know about Zhu Tianwo's strength. Although he had once seen the latter fight with Xiao Yan in the inner courtyard competition, he was far from being able to compare with now. Xiao Yan heard this and pondered for a moment. He looked at Lin Dao and Wu Shaoqi and said softly, when I just broke through to the Monarch Emperor and came out of illusory spirit space, I had a fight with Zhu Tianwo. Both of you are witnesses. Can you tell Zhu Tianwo's strength? In that match, although neither of them used any life and death techniques, Zhu Tianwo had also displayed the monarch skill that he had comprehended from the sacred spirit fire body. The power was so great that Lin Dao couldn't help but exclaim. It's hard to say. At that time, you only knew how to dodge and not attack. Who knows what level he has reached? Wu Shaoqi immediately recalled what happened after Xiao Yan's reminder. She widened her eyes and said with a puffed-up face, if he has made any progress these days, with his strength of 3 Peak of Monarch Emperor and his combined attack, he can even fight a true 7 Monarch Emperor. Lin Dao thought for a while and said what he was thinking. 7 Monarch Emperor. Not bad. Mu Yuyang gently nodded his head when he heard this. The worry in his heart also disappeared. Xiao Yan also smiled when he heard this. His eyes paused slightly. He thought of the last 2 days of cultivation that the Great Elder had arranged for them, and the help of the rich fire source Qi there. His strength had improved tremendously, let alone Zhu Tianwo. Although the latter's strength hadn't advanced, his control over the origin Qi in his body had improved. Presumably, he had reached a very familiar level. Let's continue our journey. It would be even better if we can obtain another battle command. Mu Yuyang nodded at everyone. If nothing unexpected happens, our next opponent will most likely be the Southern Sky Academy. Not only that, this island isn't that simple. Perhaps our opponent will also be the Star Sky Academy. Xiao Yan narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice. A few days ago, he had a conversation with the Xiao Ao. Although he wasn't familiar with the Star Moon Island, he had a good understanding of its mysteries. The 4 academies competition was the one who determined the strength of each academy during the battle. This way, the 4 great academies would fight in groups of 2. It is also possible. Mu Yuyang nodded, agreeing with Xiao Yan's words. After resting for a while, they moved again and flew towards the top of the mountain. After so many days of turning, they had already deviated from the original direction, and their opponents had also changed. I think it's better if you don't touch that hand. On the other side of the island, on a hill, there was an arena. On top of the arena was Sang Hao from the Star Sky Academy. At this moment, Sang Hao was lightly waving his green robe, his arms crossed in front of his chest. His face was indifferent, and on his robe was an indifferent expression. There were a few bloodstains on his robe. However, not a single drop belonged to him. On the opposite side, a fat man with an ugly expression stood on the spot. One of his arms fell down powerlessly. Blood continuously dripped from the tiger's wound, dyeing the ground red. Liu Yanchao, you didn't expect this, did you? You thought you were an expert of Southern Sky Academy, but you came here to fight me instead of challenging Shi Kanghai? You have really underestimated the strength of Star Sky. Sang Hao retracted his hands. His eyes were full of smiles as he looked at Liu Yanchao. Liu Yanchao's expression became even uglier when he heard this. Initially, he thought that with his strength, even if it was Kang Feng, he could still exchange a few rounds with him. He thought that he could eliminate a strong opponent for Southern Sky Academy. He had neglected the weakest Shi Kanghai and Sang Shoshan, who was the Heaven's Chosen One of Star Sky Academy. He had never thought that this guy in front of him would be so powerful that it was hard to imagine. Are you going to admit defeat or die? Sang Hao walked forward slowly. We have given the Southern Sky Academy preferential treatment. Sang Shoshan has chosen you from the Southern Sky Academy and let you choose whatever you want from us. If you choose me, you have to be prepared to lose or die. Right? Standing beside Liu Yanchao, Sang Hao was full of smiles. I. Liu Yanchao's eyes were red, and his heart was bleeding. This was the biggest miscalculation of Southern Sky Academy. What? Sang Hao moved closer and his smile became even wider. I admit defeat. Liu Yanchao gritted his teeth and slowly squeezed out these 3 words from his teeth. The moment he said those words, his entire body went limp and he almost fell to the ground. 2 inches, that's more like it. Sang Hao involuntarily laughed towards the sky when he heard this. The origin Qi in his hand also quietly disappeared. This fellow was quite tactful. The Southern Sky Academy has admitted defeat. The winner is the Star Sky Academy. Under the arena, a giant python with a scarlet and green body curled up its huge body. Its lantern-sized eyes sparkled with a frightening light. When it saw the situation on the arena, it slowly opened its mouth and spoke with a voice that sounded like muffled thunder. Thank you for letting me win. Thank you for letting me win. Hearing the giant python open its mouth, Sang Hao couldn't help but be overjoyed. He cupped his hands towards Liu Yanchao and said hypocritically. Liu Yanchao remained silent. The pain that came from his arm was far less than the pain in his heart. It was only the first match, but it had already brought a huge impact to the Southern Sky Academy. Brat of the Star Sky Academy, let me bring you to the top. The giant python stood up straight. It was dozens of meters long, and its waist was as thick as a bucket. It seemed to be able to break rocks and rocks. As its body twisted, the ground even cracked open. As it spoke, the giant python rose up and flew towards the peak. Behind it, Sang Hao's eyes were filled with joy. Without looking at Liu Yanchao, he flapped the origin chi wings on his back and followed the giant python. Under the lead of the giant python, the confinement between heaven and earth seemed to disappear, and it flew straight towards the peak. Damn it! Seeing Sang Hao leaving, Liu Yanchao let out a low roar. His legs gave out and he sat down on the arena. His fist suddenly smashed onto the ground, and in an instant, numerous cracks appeared on the ground. At the same time, blood also flowed out from the surface of his fist. The heart-piercing pain crazily eroded the former's nerves, causing Liu Yanchao to involuntarily suck in a breath of cold air. Only this kind of pain could temporarily numb the pain in his heart. Let's go down the mountain. While Liu Yanchao was gnashing his teeth in anger, another lion-shaped heavenly beast jumped onto the arena, its voice cold. A trace of despair flashed across Liu Yanchao's eyes when he heard this. He was silent for a moment before finally getting up. He looked at the peak with a complicated gaze and sighed. He shook his head helplessly. The lion-shaped heavenly beast faced the sky and let out a light roar. The huge bone wings on its back flapped, and it flew down the mountain first. Liu Yanchao's face was gloomy. He jumped up and followed the lion-shaped heavenly beast towards the foot of the mountain. These guys from the Star Sky Academy are harder to deal with than the last. Liu Yanchao followed behind the lion-shaped heavenly beast with an ugly expression on his face. He kept recalling the scene of his fight with Sang Hao. In just 10 exchanges, he had lost all ability to defend himself. Although Sang Hao's strength was at the 7th Monarch Emperor, his strength was at the peak of the 6th Monarch Emperor, and he had been completely defeated. I have to find a way to let Zhou Buyi know. Otherwise, the remaining 3 academies will be completely wiped out this time. Liu Yanchao's eyes sparkled. He lowered his head and remained silent. Roar! Suddenly, a miserable roar was transmitted from in front of him. It suddenly disrupted Liu Yanchao's train of thought. Before the latter could raise his head, boiling hot fresh blood swept over and landed on Liu Yanchao's body. Liu Yanchao looked in front of him in shock. At this moment, the head of the lion-shaped heavenly beast had been separated from its body. Hot blood spluttered out from its neck. Its originally ferocious eyes had already turned to ashes. There was no longer any aura in them. In front of it, there was a middle-aged man in white with white hair that hung loosely on his shoulders. His face was expressionless as he stretched out his 5 fingers. There were sharp nails on his nails, and his entire palm was covered in blood. In front of him, the huge body of the lion-shaped heavenly beast fell down. The pungent blood should have attracted countless spirit beasts hidden underground, but when the corpse fell to the ground, none of the spirit beasts appeared. You! Who are you? Liu Yanchao's body trembled as he looked at the middle-aged man in horror. What kind of strength was this? How could he kill an Emperor cultivation-level heavenly beast on the spot? Hey! The middle-aged man acted as if he didn't hear Liu Yanchao's question. He looked at his 5 fingers like a tiger and wolf. His eyes were filled with surprise. After merging with the power of the giant ape, his strength had increased tremendously. The cultivation technique given to him by the old ancestor was indeed powerful. Seeing that the middle-aged man didn't answer, Liu Yanchao's facial expression changed drastically. He suddenly turned around and rushed towards the peak of the mountain. His forehead was covered with sweat, and his heart was trembling. He seemed to have thought of something. What kind of danger was hidden in this competition? Trying to run away? The sound of Liu Yanchao leaving startled the middle-aged man. A green light flashed across the middle-aged man's eyes. The corner of his mouth revealed a cruel smile. His body flashed and appeared in front of Liu Yanchao in the blink of an eye like a gentle breeze. The middle-aged man was like a bloodthirsty lone wolf in front of the latter's shocked eyes. He quietly revealed his sharp teeth. Hu! Xiao Yan suddenly woke up from his rest. He looked around at Wu Shaoqi and Lin Dao who were still resting. He pursed his lips, shook his head, and sighed lightly. For some reason, he suddenly felt a trace of panic in his heart. Xiao Yan, what's wrong? Mu Yuyang, who had regained his senses, noticed Xiao Yan's unusual behavior and spoke softly. Nothing. Maybe I've been using my soul power a little tiredly these few days. Xiao Yan revealed a smile and rubbed the acupoints of the sun. Thank you for your hard work. In order to find the battle command, everyone has been tired these past few days. Upon hearing this, Mu Yuyang lightly nodded his head and slowly said, There's no other way. This mountain range is really too big. It's really too difficult to find a battle command. Being able to find one is already considered good luck. Xiao Yan leaned against the tree trunk and looked at the broken sky through the dense layers of tree branches. These few days, even he couldn't hold on any longer. Not only did he have to be careful of any danger that might appear in his surroundings at any time, he also had to constantly use his soul force to search his surroundings. This kind of tense days was too tortuous. I wonder how Zhu Tianwo is doing. Can I see him at the top of the mountain? Shaking his head, Xiao Yan changed the topic. Since all of you think he has the strength, then believe that he will win. Taking a step back, even if we lose, we still have a battle command. If we use it well, we can make up for our loss this time. Mu Yuyang seemed to be rather carefree as he said indifferently. Senior Mu, do you have any special feelings? Upon hearing this, Xiao Yan smiled and nodded his head. After pondering for a moment, he suddenly said in a soft voice. What? Mu Yuyang looked at Xiao Yan and frowned slightly. Before the competition, everyone said that there were countless forbidden places in Star Moon Island. The night before yesterday, those men from the purple-robed marquis broke into this mountain range and all of them died here. We have so many people here, and we have been exploring this mountain range for more than 10 days. Why haven't we seen the so-called forbidden area? Xiao Yan pondered for a moment, and then voiced out the doubts in his heart. We have only passed by a little bit. Since it's a forbidden area, it should be hidden somewhere. Besides, if we enter the forbidden area, with our strength, will we be able to come out alive? Mu Yuyang couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. The branch in his hand lightly knocked on the ground. Secret place. Xiao Yan didn't say anything after hearing this. He had talked to the Xiaoao before. The latter's description of this place was that there were dangers everywhere, and every step they took was frightening. There was no reason why after they started the competition, all the forbidden areas on this mountain disappeared. Unless, Xiao Yan's expression suddenly changed. He looked around, blinked, and said slowly, unless those old men are Star Domain Guardian. What? Mu Yuyang was startled when he heard this. Even with his mental state, he could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. That's impossible. All the Star Domain Guardians are above the heavens. Unless something that endangers the Star Domain happens, it won't be easy for them to descend to the lower realm. Furthermore, do you think that a competition of our level will attract the Star Domain Guardians to descend? He came back to his senses. Mu Yuyang's voice was heavy as he denied it. Oh, Xiao Yan frowned when he heard this. What Mu Yuyang said was not unreasonable. Did he guess wrong? Blinking his eyes, Xiao Yan gently closed his eyes. In that case, where did that inexplicable feeling of shock in his heart come from? One at the peak of Star Moon Island, dozens of days passed in the blink of an eye. The crowd was no longer as excited as before. All of them sat quietly on the hassock, waiting for the final result to be revealed. Who? While everyone was silent, a whistling sound suddenly sounded out. Following that, a strong wind swept past, startling everyone. Someone is coming up? Everyone was stunned at first. Then, they immediately stood up and looked down curiously. There, a huge python swooped down, followed by a young man. It's a disciple of Star Sky. Some of the more experienced ones could clearly see Sang Hao's face in an instant. Immediately, they shouted in a deep voice. As soon as the words left their mouth, except for Xing Qianyue who burst out laughing complacently, the expressions of the other three changed slightly. When Sang Hao appeared, it meant that one of the three academies would definitely be eliminated. However, they did not know that the academy that Sang Hao had defeated would be the same one. Under everyone's gaze, Sang Hao leapt up and landed firmly on the mountaintop. Seeing so many experts on the mountaintop, Sang Hao was slightly startled. Turning his gaze, he saw Xing Qianyue striding over. Haha, Sang Hao, well done. Say, you eliminated that academy's trash. He enthusiastically patted Sang Hao's shoulder. Xing Qianyue was all smiles. He glanced at where Su Ziyang and the other two were and deliberately shouted out loud. Sang Hao smiled when he heard this. He bowed slightly to Tang Hong, who was far away, and said with slight regret, "Elder Tang, Liu Yanchao is indeed very strong." This young man spent a lot of effort to barely win. Tang Hong's expression became gloomy when Sang Hao looked at him. He involuntarily let out a cold laugh when he heard this. A helplessness surged within his heart. Forget it, forget it. Liu Yanchao's strength is lacking, and his skill is inferior to mine. Brother Xing, congratulations. Tang Hong's facial expression returned to normal. He waved his sleeve and spoke in a calm voice. Currently, there was still Zhou Buyi and Lei Yunting in the Southern Sky Academy. It was not like they did not have the ability to fight back. Ha ha ha. Thank you very much. Xing Qianyu's brows knitted with joy. He cupped his fists at Tang Hong and looked at him proudly. Laughter echoed in everyone's ears. Elder Su, it seems like the first round of the arena is between Yun Luo and Lu Li. Yi Zan's beautiful eyes swept across Xing Qianyue and Sang Hao. Her red lips slightly parted, and her tone was filled with a bitter smile. Did you feel a lot more at ease? Seeing that Su Ziyang did not speak, Yi Zan's eyes moved like water ripples. She suddenly smiled and said, "A little." Su Ziyang didn't try to hide anything from her. He gently nodded his head. The opponents in the first match weren't the Star Sky Academy or the Southern Sky Academy. It had indeed made him feel a little more relaxed. Although the strength of the Glaze Academy couldn't be underestimated, the pressure it gave him wasn't as pressing as the pressure of the Star Sky and Nan Tian. You are really annoying. Yi Zan's red lips slightly rose when she heard this. Her pretty face revealed a trace of a smile. However, since her opponent was the Yun Luo Academy, the pressure in her heart seemed to have been reduced by a lot. At the center of the mountain peak, Old Man Chang and a few elders of Star Moon Town were sitting on a hassock. They looked at Sang Hao indifferently, but didn't say anything. Strange. Suddenly, Old Man Chang, who was in the middle, frowned slightly. As if he had sensed something, he whispered a few words to a burly old man beside him. The burly old man was the same old man who had seen through the 3 types of Star Moon Towns Xiaoyan possessed in the Star Moon Town that day. After listening to Old Man Chiang's words, the old man nodded his head with a solemn expression. He and a middle-aged man with slightly white hair stood up, taking advantage of the time when everyone's attention was focused on Sang Hao. He quietly left without alerting anyone. "You honor, follow me." In the distance, Xu Mo, who had been observing the few old men, slightly raised his eyelids and whispered to Zhou Yuan, who was beside him. The movement technique of these 2 men was extremely strange. If he hadn't observed them carefully, he might have missed them. "Teacher?" Zhou Yuan retracted his gaze from Sang Hao and looked at Xu Mo curiously. As expected, those old men can't sit still anymore. There are so many people here, and no one will notice the disappearance of a few people. Are you interested in going to the Star Moon Island? Xu Mo's face was expressionless as he spoke to Zhou Yuan in a soft voice. Zhou Yuan was visibly moved when he heard that. However, his mind was not like his age on the surface. Years of adventures had made him extremely cautious. He was very cautious when it came to this island that was full of danger. Furthermore, with the deaths of the purple-robed Marquis and the others, he actually hesitated for a moment. Don't worry, this is the 4 academies competition. Some of the terrifying forbidden lands will be sealed off. This period of time might be the safest period of time in the entire Star Moon Island. Xu Mo wasn't surprised to see Zhou Yuan hesitating. He said in a soft voice, "Students, listen to teacher's arrangements." Zhou Yuan was excited when he heard that. He said in a low voice, "All right." Xu Mo gently nodded his head. He grabbed Zhou Yuan's hand and took advantage of the fact that no one had noticed him. The sound of the wind under his feet suddenly rose. In the next moment, he had already pulled Zhou Yuan and disappeared from where they stood. Xu Mo was known as the Extreme Mysterious Speed, and his movement technique was ranked first in the Extreme Mysterious Sect. Under the full power of his movement technique, no ordinary person would be able to detect him. Patong. At dawn, the sky was still slightly dark. Xiao Yan and the others had escaped from the pursuit of an Emperor Cultivation level heavenly beast. After running for an unknown amount of time, Wu Shaoqi's legs went soft. She sat on the ground and gasped for breath. She could no longer walk. Mu Yuyang waved his hand when he saw this. The few of them immediately rested on the spot. Xiao Yan wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked around with a complicated expression. If the four of them had joined forces with the Emperor cultivation level heavenly beast, however, they had just exchanged a few rounds. Countless spirit beasts and heavenly beasts had arrived. If they were surrounded, what awaited them would be another battle of life and death. Mu Yuyang decisively gave the order. The four of them could only leave. The surrounding environment was extremely unfamiliar. Under the continuous pursuit of the heavenly beast, they had long deviated from their original position. If this continued, no one could guarantee who the opponent in the second ring was. This place is the Four Academies competition. It's clearly a wilderness survival. Wu Shaoqi dragged her tired body and forced herself up from the ground. She muttered with dissatisfaction. These days, they had been running away in this mountain range in a sorry state many times and were almost surrounded by countless spirit beasts several times. Lin Dao leaned against a huge tree and exhaled. Even with his resilience, he still felt a trace of exhaustion. Xiao Yan looked at Wu Shaoqi's tired face and his heart suddenly moved. With a flip of his palm, a jade bottle appeared in his hand. The jade bottle was filled with the extreme will heavenly spring that he had obtained after defeating the blood flame-scaled beast in the realm in Valley Trial. It was incomparably beneficial to recovering one's physical strength. What is this? Wu Shaoqi took the jade bottle from Xiao Yan and looked inside curiously. Wisps of moist vapor diffused out. When it came into contact with Wu Shaoqi's tender face, a trace of comfort instantly emerged from her face. The effect of the spring water that recovers physical strength is not bad. Xiao Yan smiled and took out 2 more bottles and handed them to Lin Dao and Mu Yuyang. Before he went up the mountain, he had divided dozens of bottles of the extreme will heavenly spring. He had forgotten about it a few times because he was in a hurry. This time he remembered it because of Wu Shaoqi's reminder. Restore your strength? Mu Yuyang took the bottles and looked at them. Wu Shaoqi had drunk a mouthful of the cold spring water. Suddenly, a relaxed feeling spread out from her limbs and bones. The tiredness in her body had disappeared. What a good thing. Why did you only take it out now? Wu Shaoqi looked at Xiao Yan happily and said with some dissatisfaction. Didn't you just remember? Xiao Yan smiled and drank a mouthful himself. The exhaustion in his body quickly disappeared and was replaced by vigorous energy. This thing is not bad. Mu Yuyang and Lin Dao gently took a sip. They sensed that their physical strength had recovered. Joy appeared on both of their faces. This kind of thing was even more effective than some medicine pills. Xiao Yan smiled. Just as he was about to speak, his expression suddenly changed. His eyes swiftly looked into the distance. In the distant sky, a middle-aged man with white hair and shoulder-length hair stood in the air. His eyes were like a lone wolf as he stared coldly at them. Zero hoo hoo hoo. A continuous wind suddenly blew over from within the dense forest. The branches emitted cracking sounds. The moment Xiao Yan looked at the middle-aged man, a cold aura surged out from the latter's body at the same time, causing the air around him to continuously explode. This aura instantly attracted the attention of Mu Yuyang and the other two. All of their eyes were shocked as they looked towards the distant sky. The middle-aged man's white hair was draped over his shoulders and he wore a white robe. The few of them were like prey that had been targeted by ferocious beasts, and their bodies involuntarily trembled. Kai, Xiao Yan's nerves were extremely tensed. His eyes stared intently at the sky. The monarch flame surged into his eyes. Spiritual strength surged out from between his brows and surged towards the middle-aged man in an overwhelming manner. This isn't a physical body. Under the powerful soul energy, the middle-aged man's body trembled slightly. His entire body seemed to be made up of a huge origin chi, like a rootless duckweed. Clone? Mu Yuyang instantly reacted. He gritted his teeth and laughed lightly. Even if it's a clone, its strength should be far beyond Emperor cultivation level. As he spoke, the middle-aged man in the air suddenly moved. He had already rushed towards them. His body was like a fierce wind, tearing the space apart. Let's go! Sensing the strength of the middle-aged man, Mu Yuyang decisively gave up on the idea of fighting with him. If the four of them used all their trump cards, they might be able to compete with him. However, that was under circumstances where they had no other choice. He wanted to use it as a backup plan and planned to use it at its peak. Since the Four Academies competition had chosen this place, after so many days, they had a rough understanding of it. It was not only to compare their individual strength, but also to test the overall strength of the team and the degree of cooperation of the team. Whether they could survive here was also one of the core aspects of the trial. As the leader of the team's strength, Mu Yuyang naturally wouldn't joke about the lives of a few people. Currently, the only thing he could do was run. After drinking the extreme will heavenly spring given by Xiao Yan, their physical strength had almost fully recovered. Although the origin qi in their bodies consumed a lot of energy, it was still enough to support their escape. Boom! The middle-aged man was like a cannonball as he fell from the sky. His fist landed on the ground that the few of them had just stood on. In an instant, the ground seemed to tremble slightly. Soon after, several dense spiderweb-like cracks swiftly spread across the ground with the middle-aged man at the center. The attack did not hit him. The middle-aged man did not say anything. His dark and cold eyes looked at Xiao Yan and the others who had left far away. His body moved like a gentle breeze as he chased after them. Although they were shocked by the middle-aged man's strength, Xiao Yan and the others didn't stop at all. They exerted their movement technique to the extreme and rushed upwards. It had been nearly 10 days since they arrived at the hill where the first arena was located. As long as they arrived at the second arena, there would be Star Moon towns there that would listen to the orders of the Star Moon town. At that time, it would be much easier for them to deal with the middle-aged man. Xiao Yan, was it him that you said that day? Lin Dao's figure was like a dragon, and he was the fastest among them. However, he suddenly spoke as he was running beside Xiao Yan. After they obtained the battle command from the giant ape, Xiao Yan suddenly felt a bone-deep cold aura. Hence, they quickly left. The sudden appearance of this mysterious middle-aged man reminded him of what had happened that night. More or less. Xiao Yan also woke up from a dream after being reminded by Lin Dao. Immediately, his heart was startled. In other words, not long after they entered the mountain, they were targeted by this middle-aged man. Who is this guy? Mu Yuyang's figure leapt in the air, easily leaping over a huge rock. He waved the heavenly net sword in his hand, instantly chopping the huge rock into countless rocks. As the sword chi swept across, all the rocks flew towards the middle-aged man, temporarily slowing down his speed and buying some time for the few of them to escape. There are many forbidden areas in Star Moon Island. Under the watchful eyes of some old men, it's impossible for anyone to break into this place. In this way, there is only one possibility. Xiao Yan gritted his teeth. Suddenly, a bright light burst out from his eyes. What? Wu Shaoqi, who was by the side, did not idle either. She held a bright red hard bow in her hand. As she pulled the bowstring, numerous fire arrows shot out. They carried ferocious might as they pierced through the air and shot towards the middle-aged man. Although they did not cause any harm to the middle-aged man, they also hindered his speed. Mu Yuyang and Lin Dao also looked towards the former when they heard Xiao Yan's analysis. This fellow should have escaped from the forbidden area. Hearing this, their facial expression changed, but they didn't show any signs of shock. They had vaguely thought of this point, but hearing what Xiao Yan said, it was still extremely shocking. No wonder a clone has the strength of an emperor cultivation. If I came here, I'm afraid we wouldn't even know how we died. Wu Shaoqi's face was filled with excitement. In this kind of crisis, only she could smile. This sovereign clone, Xiao Yan mumbled to himself when he heard this. He suddenly looked at Mu Yuyang and said in a deep voice, this sovereign clone, Senior Mu, do you think the other 3 academies have encountered the same situation? It's possible. Mu Yuyang instantly thought of this. Since they had set their eyes on the mountain forest, the other 3 courtyards naturally wouldn't be able to escape. This is getting more and more interesting. Xiao Yan clenched his teeth and laughed softly. Beads of sweat were already dripping from his forehead. This competition had unknowingly exceeded everyone's expectations. On the west side of the island of Star Moon, the 4 men from the Southern Sky Academy were also crazily running about in the forest. Zhou Buyi was at the last position of the 4 men. He looked at a middle-aged man in white who was chasing closely behind with a gloomy expression on his face. He clenched his fist, but he still gritted his teeth and gave up on his plan. Although he wanted to compete with him, he had to take Zhou Xingyue into consideration. If they really fought together, the weakest Zhou Xingyue might get hurt. It would be more painful than killing him. What the hell is this thing? Zhou Buyi stepped on the ground with the tip of his foot. He rushed forward like a cannonball. The middle-aged man did not seem to feel anything. He did not say anything and chased after them closely. Naturally, he did not know anything from Zhou Buyi's mouth. Who are you? Beside a river, Sang Shoshan looked at the middle-aged man with white hair and a solemn expression on his face. Beside him, Wu Tiandu and Shi Kanghai also had solemn expressions on their faces. Kang Feng stood behind Sang Shoshan and his eyes revealed a rare glint as he looked at the middle-aged man with an expressionless face. Boom! The middle-aged man replied to Sang Shoshan's question. In an instant, his strength far exceeded that of an ordinary emperor cultivation, causing everyone to be shocked. This is a clone. I have no idea where this true body is. Green light rose from his eyes. With the help of the heavenly martial origin eye, Wu Tian quickly discovered the identity of the middle-aged man. Immediately, he shouted out loudly, and the few of them retreated at the same time. Even though they were considered to be the best amongst monarch-emperor-level warriors, they were still unable to create any big waves in the face of emperor cultivation warriors. Let's go. Kang Feng didn't attack. He just stared at the strength displayed by the middle-aged man. With a cold shout, he waved his robe. He took the lead and left. Sang Shoshan looked at the middle-aged man with a gloomy expression and waved his hand. With Wu Tiandu, Shi Kanghai followed Kang Feng. If Sang Hao was here, with the combined strength of the five of them. But now, the only thing they could do was to escape. In the dense forest, in a flat open space, a white-robed middle-aged man with white hair and shoulder-length hair was sitting cross-legged. His hands were placed on his legs and his fingers moved lightly. In an instant, he had grasped the situation of the four clones. I don't need to personally deal with you guys. A bunch of ants, I'll play with you guys. Green light flickered in his eyes. The middle-aged man shook his head and revealed a sinister smile. With a flick of his 10 fingers, 4 white origin cheese flowed out from his fingertips and shot into the sky, quietly rushing in 4 different directions. Boom! Suddenly, a vibrating sound was heard. In the next moment, the 4 origin cheese seemed to have suffered a heavy blow and were destroyed, causing the middle-aged man's expression to change slightly. People from the Star Moon Town. The middle-aged man was still sitting cross-legged. His eyes were cold as he spoke in a soft voice. That's right. Zhou Tinlong, how dare you come out? As the middle-aged man's voice faded, a robust old man walked out from the dense forest behind him. His eyes flickered with a light that seemed to be able to see through everything. 1 inch, what's there to be afraid of? The middle-aged man named Zhou Tinlong sneered. Even though his means were easily detected by this man, he didn't panic at all. You, a mere emperor cultivation old wolf, dare to come out and destroy the 4 academies competition? Did he ask you to come out? The burly old man was familiar with the middle-aged man in front of him, so he spoke in a cold voice. You found out. Zhou Tinlong's eyelids twitched slightly when he heard this, and then he said with an expressionless face. That's why I'm here to deal with you. The old man nodded. His face was cold and stern. In the next moment, he had already charged forward. In the blink of an eye, he had already passed through space and appeared in front of Zhou Tinlong. He swung his fist and smashed it at the latter without any fancy moves. The space where the fist wind passed even exploded, causing one's scalp to feel numb. Green light surged within Zhou Tinlong's eyes. His throat moved slightly and he seemed to have let out a wolf's roar. His white robe moved gently and he dodged the seemingly ordinary punch of the old man in a miserable manner. His body was like a gentle breeze as he instantly retreated to a couple of dozen meters away. His speed is quite fast. The old man turned around and laughed coldly. He loosened his fist and a strand of white hair fell from his fingertip. It slowly flew in the air. Oh! Zhou Tinlong bent down on the ground. His throat moved slightly, and he let out a low roar. In front of this old man, his strength was actually so weak. Don't even think about using your clone. Although you haven't used this pair of eyes for many years, you can still see it clearly. The old man chuckled and said indifferently when he saw the green light in Zhou Tinlong's eyes. Ow! Just as the old man's voice faded, Zhou Tinlong suddenly let out a long roar towards the sky. An ear-piercing sound wave followed the space and struck like lightning, causing the surrounding dense forest to quietly explode. The old man was careless, and his eardrums began to vibrate continuously. He even felt a little dizzy in front of his eyes. Swoosh! In the next moment, a piercing sound that tore through the air suddenly sounded. Zhou Tinlong suddenly leapt forward and arrived in front of the old man in an instant. He extended his arm with a loud bang, and sharp claws appeared on his 5 fingers, mercilessly grabbing towards the old man's chest. The corner of his mouth had already revealed a bloodthirsty smile. Boom! Suddenly, the old man's eyes widened. 2 rays of white light were instantly emitted from his eyes. The moment Zhou Tianlong's 5 claws were about to touch the former's chest, the rays of light struck Zhou Tianlong's body. The latter's movements suddenly stiffened. He actually felt a moment of numbness. Crack! At the same time, the old man recovered from the buzzing sound in his ears. He looked at Zhou Tianlong, who had a dull expression on his face. He threw out another calm punch, and it hit the latter's abdomen. With a miserable cry of pain, Zhou Tianlong was sent flying, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Rumble! Under the enormous force, Zhou Tianlong directly broke dozens of huge trees before he slowly came to a stop. His face was pale as he fell to the ground. When he raised his head, the old man had already appeared in front of him. Master, spare me. Zhou Tianlong's heart turned cold when he sensed the icy cold aura that spread all over the old man's body. With a thump, he forcefully endured the intense pain in his abdomen and knelt on the ground. His body trembled slightly and turned into a white wolf with beautiful lines. The white wolf bent its legs and buried its huge head deep in its chest as it howled. Seeing the familiar white wolf in front of him, the old man was stunned. He couldn't help but withdraw his hand as a trace of sadness flashed across his eyes. He didn't know how many years ago, but he happened to see a white wolf that was being chased by a few Star Moon towns in the forest of Star Moon Town. Through the heavenly god's eye, he could naturally tell how astonishing the bone structure of this white wolf was. Immediately, his heart moved, and he rescued the little white wolf from the mouths of a few spirit beasts. After that, he healed its injuries and brought it back to Star Moon Town. Under the guidance of the old man, the little white wolf improved at a lightning speed. His relationship with the little white wolf also increased day by day. The two of them were inseparable. It had become a scenery of the Star Moon Town. When the little white wolf could talk, the two of them bowed to him and me, and the two of them had defeated many experts who harbored ill intentions towards Star Moon Island. They had helped each other, to the point where they could give their lives to each other. Until one day, in order to kill an expert who had intruded the Star Moon Island, the white wolf had mistakenly entered a forbidden area in the Star Moon Island. After coming out, his character had changed greatly. He had killed dozens of ordinary old men in the Star Moon Town. Although he had also taken the risk of entering the forbidden area to investigate the reason, he didn't discover anything. After so many years, due to various reasons, a man and a beast would occasionally interact with each other. As for the white wolf, he always had an unerasable feeling. He had never been able to do anything to the white wolf. Until now, I've let you go so many times, but you're still stubborn. If I let you go, I don't know how many students will be harmed. A trace of pain flashed across the old man's eyes as he spoke in a heavy tone. I know I was wrong. I didn't want this to happen, but I was controlled by that mysterious power. This body is completely out of my control. The white wolf raised its head, and its green eyes were filled with pain. Oh! Hearing this, the conflicted expression on the old man's face became even more intense. His aged face twitched. Clearly, his heart was also suffering from intense torment. After a long while, the old man slowly said, I know that you are under the control of the forbidden area, but you are threatening the 4 directions. Right now, you are in the 4 academies competition. If I don't kill you, I don't know how many students will suffer. The wolf lowered its head, and a trace of coldness flashed across its dark green eyes. Zhou Tianlong said earnestly, I promise I won't. I went out to see a few students a few days ago. They escaped and killed a few heavenly beasts. The killing intent in my body was also controlled. Thank you, Master, for showing mercy. Disciple will immediately enter the forbidden area and never come out again. Hearing Zhou Tianlong's solemn words, the old man pursed his lips and let out a long sigh. The killing intent in his heart also quietly dissipated. You can leave now. You have to take care of yourself. If I find out that you have killed another student, don't blame me for disregarding the relationship between master and disciple. Turning around, the old man gritted his teeth and waved his hand without saying anything. Obviously, he already knew that Zhou Tianlong had killed Liu Yanchao. Do they know about this? Zhou Tianlong was startled when he heard this. The white fur on his body exploded. He said in shock, if that Zhang guy found out about this, he would be dead for sure. Maybe. The old man sighed and stopped talking. Although he was also an old servant who had been stranded in Star Moon Island, he still didn't know much about Old Man Chiang's true strength. He nodded. Green light surged in Zhou Tinlong's eyes. He clenched his sharp teeth and stared at the old man with his back facing him. Killing intent surged in his heart. After hesitating for a moment, he still didn't attack. Even though he had transformed into a beast, he still didn't attack. He was still not a match for this old man. If he failed to launch a sneak attack, he would be dead for sure. With a light step, Zhou Tinlong's body suddenly trembled. He turned into a gentle breeze and disappeared in a flash, rushing into the distance. Sigh. Evil creature. The old man lowered his head when he sensed that Zhou Tinlong was far away. There was a bitter smile on his face. In that instant just now, he had clearly felt the killing intent that surged out from Zhou Tinlong's heart. Oh no, I forgot to ask him to withdraw his clone. He suddenly slapped his head. The old man's face was filled with uncertainty. What should he do if this evil creature ran to another place and continued controlling his clone to hunt down the students of the 4 academies? Damn it, Lu Chang must have also noticed its clone, so he can only eliminate it. The ones closest to this place are the girls of Glaze Academy. The heavenly passage god's eyes looked around. In an instant, he sensed the group of students closest to this place. Immediately, his body moved gently and he had already rushed into the distance in an instant. Gulp, gulp, gulp. After escaping, Xiao Yan suddenly drank a mouthful of the extreme will heavenly spring. A surge of strength surged into his body once again. The swelling and pain in his legs had eased up a lot. He had been chased by the mysterious middle-aged man for a long time. If it were not for the help of the extreme will heavenly spring, they would have been exhausted a long time ago. What is this place? Mu Yuyang raised his head. The surrounding scenery had become extremely strange. Not far ahead, there was an endless bamboo forest. I don't care anymore. That guy behind us is running out of origin cheese. Just hold on for a while longer, and his strength will be greatly reduced. Then, we can join hands and kill him. Xiao Yan didn't have time to think. He shouted out loudly. The middle-aged man who was chasing closely behind him was made up of origin cheese. After such a long journey, the consumption of origin cheese was extremely high. All right, charge in. Mu Yuyang nodded. After being chased by the middle-aged man for so long, his heart had accumulated endless anger. Wu Shaoqi and Lin Dao naturally had no objections. Regarding the middle-aged man, they had long wanted to fight him. In the blink of an eye, the 4 of them had already rushed into the bamboo forest. The middle-aged man, who was chasing closely behind, flashed a few times and arrived in front of the bamboo forest. When he saw the dense bamboo forest, his footsteps suddenly stopped. A green glow flashed in his eyes for a moment before he slowly retreated, as if he was extremely afraid of this bamboo forest.